They don't want to stay at home when you pull them. They just want flexible working hours and flexible working conditions like you have. And I think we should all advocate for that. It's not one or the other. But when you sit here and you go,
Why is Candace wearing the most masculine thing out of everyone I've just seen? She's wearing like this girl suit thing, and everyone else is wearing feminine clothing. Even this chick, I think, isn't that the chick that debates on like modern day debate and has her tits out all the time? For once, they aren't out, but yeah, it's interesting. Interesting first insight. This is probably not going to be the most high level discussion considering the subject matter. Although I generally like Candace Owens. I think she has a good message, especially when it comes to people like that. You know, she has more balls than a lot of dudes, so I can respect that.
oh, you'll be more fulfilled doing this than spend all your time doing that. We would love for you to leave the public eye and go focus on what makes you fulfilled. Okay.
Hi, my name is Candace Owens. I am a podcaster, a mother, a wife, and also the author of the upcoming book, Make Him a Sandwich. And today I am surrounded by 20 feminists. My first claim is that the sexual revolution has devalued women and made them infinitely less
I agree.
happy.
That's good. Let's see how they expand and kind of break this down. Why is a dude here?
Hello.
Oh God.
Hi, I'm Samaya.
Samaya, nice to meet you. I'm Candace.
Nice to meet you too. So my question for you is, statistics show that 60% of women who are murdered by their intimate partners, murdered by someone that they are in close relations with. That's
What? I'm gonna let her expand, but that seems like the biggest non sequitur ever. I mean, the claim is women have been less happy since the sexual revolution, which I would say happened around the time they started getting the right to vote and whatnot. And then, like, well, 60% of women are murdered by their partners. Like, whoa. Okay.
according to the
What does that have to do
UN
with anything?
from 2023.
Yeah.
So how is it that women are so valued, quote unquote, in the home, and yet that's the place where they're at the most danger?
Okay, so I'm not sure what that has to do with the sexual revolution.
Right, the sexual revolution.
The first claim.
The sexual revolution gave.
I'm happy to answer it. I'm just saying that, if you broaden that statistic, you
Sure.
are more likely in general just to be murdered by somebody you know. So, of course.
But men are much less likely to be murdered by, their
That's
intimate
not
partners.
true.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm sure, because men are less likely to be murdered by women. Full stop.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that statistic makes sense to me. I'm still not sure how this correlates to whether or not
The sexual revolution increased women's ability to leave the house, women's ability to control their own reproductive capabilities, women's ability to, control their own capacity within the workforce in regards to their own sexual capacity. So it is the very fact that
But your stat is from 2023. Oh my God, dude, I'm already 3 minutes in. I feel like bailing, bro. Oh, okay. All right. Well, no one's actually complained about it, but usually in these videos, after about 30 minutes to like 45 minutes in, I start molding a little bit because it's just so stupid, but like, wow.
sexual revolution happened that made our access to the workplace much more.
Okay, let me make sure I'm not a retard. Okay, correct, her stat was 2023.
Their intimate partners, murdered by someone that they are in close relations with. Statistics show that 60% of women who are murdered by their intimate partners, murdered by someone that they are in close relations with. That's according to the UN from 2023.
Yeah.
So, oh my, okay, so your argument is, your argument is that the sexual revolution has empowered women and made them safer, and then you use a stat from 2023, many decades, in fact, literally a century, arguably a century, into the sexual revolution to show that before the sexual revolution, they were not as happy. That would be like me saying, well, the economy was so much worse before. The economy is so much better now. Look, right now, the economy is doing 20%, has like a 20%, I don't know, effectiveness rate in some field. It's like, dude, you're using a stat from now to show that now is better than before. Like, that a negative stat, using a negative
How is
stat from
it
now to
that
show.
women are revolutionary?
So exactly, so that statistic makes sense to me. I'm still not sure how this correlates to whether or not
The
the
sexual revolution increased much more, or just the public sphere in general, much more easy. So, like, without the sexual revolution, women would be much more confined to the place where they're at the most danger. Isn't that true?
So you think that, just so I'm trying to understand your argument here, you think that if we didn't have the sexual revolution, less women or more women would be murdered? Are you saying that women are
More
being...
women would be murdered for sure.
Okay, I disagree with that. I still don't think it has anything to do with the claim that women are infinitely less happy because of the sexual revolution, which...
Okay, hold on. Let me. 60% show that murdered women were killed by intimate partner or family member. Yeah, so you think a woman going out to work for a few hours every day and then staying home on the weekends is going to make that... Like, this is such a stupid argument.
has
I think
devalued
you'd
women?
probably be less happy if you're being murdered.
Oh,
Anyone?
okay, yeah, I don't. Okay. Okay. There is definitely a correlation between personal relationships and domestic violence. And just to be clear,
Right.
if we're talking
Dude, this is like the most basic dumb argument.
about just like a monogamous
Fallacious
relationships,
argument.
the most violent relationships that are on the books are between lesbian partners. Yes, when people are intimate,
That's not a true
that is actually
statistic.
true.
No, the statistic you're talking about is people who have faced domestic violence. Lesbians, yes, are more likely to have faced domestic violence, but that's because they typically came from relationships with men in which
No,
they were mistreated.
lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships that we have on the
True,
books.
but we can move
Statistically,
on.
they can fact check that claim. The point being is that it's not exactly a stunning statistic to say that when people are in relationships, period, whether those relationships are homosexual, whether they're
But
married,
you're
whether
saying
they're-
that the sexual
let me
revolution.
finish. I've let you try to explain how this is correlated to
ahead.
happiness, and I don't think it does. I actually think you're having a different debate right now. But yes, absolutely, it makes perfect sense that you are more likely in general when you are in a relationship because people are driven by anger by people that they know, whether or not we're talking about boyfriend and girlfriend, girlfriend and girlfriend, a husband and a wife, a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife. Yes, of course, the instances of domestic violence.
And you know what the funny thing is? Like, yeah, women are more likely to be murdered. That's a general fact. That's a fact throughout all of human history. And that's just because men are physically stronger. So if anything, this provides an argument for why we should have traditional gender roles where women are protected as the quote-unquote physically weaker sex. Well, not quote-unquote, but the weaker quote-unquote sex. And I'm on YouTube, okay? Gotta make things sound a little bit nicer so they don't take down the video. But you know what I mean, okay? If you know me, I don't know if you do, but if you know me, you know what I would say that in a much stronger way if I was on my Discord or something. But if anything, this supports gender roles. This supports the argument against the sexual revolution. Okay, so this is so stupid.
Are going to take place when you're inside of a home. But the sexual revolution, encouraging women to give up their goods for free, which is what I'm speaking about, and encouraging men not to marry these women or to have long-term relationships, what I am saying is a direct contributor to their unhappiness because women are giving up their goods for free and women are now entering the workplace and that does not actually make them happy.
Okay, pause. Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Oh God.
Hello.
Wait, is that? I thought that was a dude. Is that?
How are you? I'm Candace.
Nice to meet you. Julian, my pronouns are they, them. It's very interesting to think of it.
This is the most impressive they them I've ever seen. I still don't know. Like usually when they talk, they're like, oh, that's a dude or oh, that's a girl. But I still have no clue. Like this is the most androgynous person I've ever seen in my life. I don't know. It looks like okay. This is my guess. That's a dude who took a bunch of estrogen. That's my guess.
Just think about the gender binary. It's how do we place value on human beings in general? And so when we think about placing value, that comes from a place of power, right? So I think let's select like the Victorian era. You have this
Wrong. Okay, so that's like the wrong assumption. Human value comes from power? No. Human value is a okay, let's get into like philosophical stuff. So, human value is a moral claim. Okay? Morality doesn't come from power. In terms of like state of affairs, they may be able to force that to people to believe it, but that's not a philosophically sound way. That's like an ad balcum argument. which is an argument from force. So because of power, therefore X, Y, or Z, that's a fallacy. So human value can only be grounded in Christianity with a transcendent source. Okay, power, sure, it helps get ideas forward, but that's not a transcendent source. That's still within human autonomy. In order to break human autonomy and make it non-subjective, objective, you need a transcendental source, which, per the transcendental argument, is the Christian God, the Trinity. So, from the first thing she said, she's already wrong. So everything else she says is going to be predicated on a faulty assumption. So,
dominant group of people coming from white supremacy deciding who gets to have a proper status in the world. And so that is already like taking human beings and devaluing them. And so what the sexual revolution did was to help people seek out empowerment, which increased value no matter the gender. So when it comes to sexual revolution, let's look at one contribution is sex education. I'm actually an educator. I teach sociology and LGBTQ studies, and I have absolutely seen the positive outcome.
to who? I mean, you said that like educator, like college. I would, well, I don't really hope anything, but college at least. I mean, ugh, like I couldn't imagine having my kid. And I'm not saying she is. Okay, I haven't heard it, but I'm just like, let's express. I couldn't imagine being a father and having my kid come home and saying, "Oh yeah, so we're this they them that was had like a mohawk thing with a bun and it was telling me about how like I could be like a boy or girl." Like, oh my God.
With the sexual revolution and sex education and seeing people empower themselves. And with that comes safety when it comes to decreasing STIs, abuse, sexual assault. Again, people get to empower themselves of all genders. And I know earlier you mentioned about
I don't know, she's kind of going all over the place. This is a bit of a gish gallop. I'm talking about Victorian era and then white supremacy, and then I was talking about sex education and how that's a part of the sexual revolution. As far as I understand, uh, to quote Thomas Sowell, I've heard him talk about this before. Sex education actually gave more like, teen pregnancies, and teen pregnancies not in the good way, in marriage and a husband they'll be together for 60 years, but more like high school kids screwing that have no business doing it. So
violence amongst lesbians and sapphic community, which I do identify within. All genders can be subjected to violence.
That was the point I was making. So I wasn't sure of how her claim was relating to what we were talking about, whether or not it makes people happy or unhappy. Relationships are obviously a ground where there can be violence.
I guess I could just wrap it up by saying, like, if we all have access to like sex education through the incredible work of feminists through the sexual revolution, we are able to gain access.
Sex education. Okay, dude, the penis goes on the hole. Like, what's sex education? Like, are you talking about how you teach like oral or like anal or something? I mean, this is a bit vulgar, but like, what education? Like, what? Oh, if a man tries and coerce you and force you and whatever, then you should like get away from. Well, unfortunately, that type of education doesn't really work too well because, especially when it's administered by someone not their father. Because if a guy wants to force a woman, they're just gonna force them. Like, saying no doesn't actually really. If someone actually wants to do it, saying no won't do anything. Okay, so it's a bit of a zero-sum game. The actual way to prevent this type of stuff is by having strong fathers. Again, that's gender roles. Because I mean, first of all, their intelligence can only go so far. I'm not talking about women, of course. I'm not talking about women. That would be insane. But also, in terms of thinking, like logic, emotionally, they're actually very intelligent. So that's their field. But logical, like thinking, that's like the man's field. That's not a problem. Okay, I don't say that to demean. Like, I make jokes sometimes, but actually, in a serious manner, that's actually a great thing. It's beautiful. But that's why you need gender roles, so they can complement each other, make each other whole. And they can help each other. So, in this case, there should be strong men protecting women. That's the odds. Now, if you want to be a feminist saying, oh, well, the men are weak or whatever, well, your rhetoric is a little bit unfeminine, so I would disagree with the rhetoric, but I would agree with the statement. Yeah. I mean, I think this problem of the sexual revolution is ultimately men's fault. Because I think women are a product of their authority, And in this case, these people's authority is not themselves and their own thinking. It's actually like government propaganda, etc. So it's just a result of weak men. I mean, this is what happens. So I'm not mad at women. I don't think this is a woman's fault. Not only these red pill dudes say like women, women, women. Like in an honest, holistic sense, it's actually men's fault.
This information and gain skills to create an equitable society, egalitarian within our relationships, whether it be
Again, she's making so many assumptions. Like she had the human value thing, which is stupid. Now she's saying egalitarianism. This assumes a bunch of moral oughts. Like there should be egalitarianism. That humans have value because of like power structure. Like this is just so stupid.
platonic romantic. I'm so grateful for those feminists who have
Platonic romantic.
fought for us so we can gain those spaces and create a healthier society.
Great speech.
Are you
So
a
what's the argument?
believer in the government doing everything that it can to make people happy?
So when it comes, as someone that teaches in the public sector, I understand the concern when it comes about what is a teacher, what kind of information they're providing to the students. I do believe that we, as a teacher, I should be able to give that sort of information. Again, I teach college students. One of my claims is I believe that we should mandate sex education amongst college students. So yes, I do.
What are you gonna I don't understand what you could possibly educate them on beyond the basics. Like, okay, listen, don't sleep with a bunch of people because you might get an STD. Okay, it goes in like this. If you use the other hole, there's a chance for STD. There's you can do something with the mouth. I mean, like what? Like, come on. Like, what other education is there?
Do want the state, I
Why
would
do you need
like
a
the
whole
government
college class
to
for this?
give us those resources so we can implement that curriculum.
Okay. Are you consider yourself a feminist, I'm assuming?
A queer feminist. There's different. There's variations, right?
What is a queer feminist as opposed to a feminist, just so I understand?
Well, so I heavily believe in queer theory. So, the gender binary that we understand, it comes from colonization.
Dude, oh my god, could I even survive this without just bursting out laughing? Because I feel it's a bit rude to just start laughing like this, but I just can't do it. It's not, like, I'm not just trying to appeal to ridicule, like just saying, oh, it's funny, I'm not going to address it intellectually, but the problem is, I already addressed the problem. It's based on a bunch of assumptions that are wrong. So here, listen to this part, I heard this.
So, the gender binary that we understand, it comes from colonization.
Colonization. Like, what are you talking about? Again, this is a whole power structure thing. Like, the gender binary comes from, well, I would say it's justified. It's true, and if it's true, obviously that presupposes it exists because of Christianity, the presupposition. Now, that's a bit, you could argue that's a little bit separate from the conversation, but I would disagree because this is an ethical statement. She's saying moral shoulds. You only get shoulds from some kind of epistemic, ethical, and metaphysical systems. I think all those things are bunched up into one because they're all intertwined. So that's what the argument should be about if she's going to make these type of claims.
So someone who is mixed race, family from Mexico, we have the Muxés in Mexico, which is an indigenous tribe. They believed in gender fluidity. And then you have European colonizers coming who dismantle that. And now everything that we understand when it comes to gender is a Western lens. So from a queer...
So you don't even think women exist, I'm guessing.
I think everyone should be empowered to figure out their identity and explore the language that best describes themselves. So freedom, America, right? America, freedom. And I want to believe in that when it comes to identity. Everyone should have the freedom to decide how they want to identify, as long...
Everyone should. Should. Why? Where do you get your shoulds from?
They're not causing harm, but that's where we get into the debate.
Because they're not causing harm. Yeah, so that's like the most libertarian, like liberal presupposition you could ever have. And it has the same problem as what I said earlier.
What is harm?
So just, again, to be clear, to go back to this claim, we are debating female happiness. You are saying you do not identify as a female.
I identify with all gender expressions. So from masculinity to femininity. So
I'm just saying, are you just saying that as a part of queer theory, you're debating whether or not women are happier after the sexual revolution? I'm just trying to understand because it seems like you're debating queer theory as opposed to female.
I believe
being
all
happy.
genders benefit from the sexual revolution.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Okay, yeah, so no one's really engaged with the points at hand at all.
Hello,
I'm Zena.
Zena. Very much like your name.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Can we start with the beginning? Do you identify as a female?
I identify as a woman, yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I do want to like get back to your premise. You're saying that women have been devalued, right, by the sexual revolution. This like kind of presumes two things. One, that there has been a loss of worth, right, for women. So you're saying that women have, as human beings, lost worth. Women who prior to their sexual revolution were worth more than women today.
I would say that
They value themselves more. So I guess the easiest argument for this is being a hoe. I mean, there's a lot more hoes today than there were before. And if you start with the presupposition that a woman's innocence, virginity, etc., give them value, then, I mean, it logically follows the sexual revolution's been devastating. And that's a presupposition that can be grounded only objectively because of the Christian worldview. Now, again, that brings a contention to about God, but again, these are ethical arguments. So your ethical argument means nothing if you can't ground it.
yes, women have devalued themselves by becoming overtly
According
sexual. That's my claim. So, I mean, also according to just, and let's not remove this from the other part of the claim, which that it has made women infinitely less happy.
Right. So are you saying, but you're saying that according to you, women have been devalued?
Not according to me. According to the time in which people are getting married, how difficult it is for people to find a partner that's willing to commit to them. And I think that's in large part due to the fact
arguments.
that women are offering sex for free because it was a major component of the sexual revolution was this idea.
So a woman's worth is tied to her sexuality.
It's not tied to, well, absolutely. If you're going to be having multiple partners, you are going to be devaluing yourself.
You're worth less as a human being.
Not as a human being.
Okay, not as a human being, but as a woman, which is an extension of the human nature. So there's a human nature, and human nature is immutable in the sense of its value. Now, men and women are like sub-branches of human nature, and these can be immuted in the sense of you're not acting like a man or you're not acting like a woman.
Just, in terms of trying to have a partnership and a productive relationship, certainly men are not going to be clamoring to have a relationship with somebody when there's the market is throwing them.
A man's response to your action.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, she's gonna, well, just let her say, because this is actually a decent point.
Is what defines your worth, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I would say that I would argue that what makes women actually happy is family. So
okay, so let's break down. She made a good argument from the perspective of value. And this is the problem with divorcing the argument from an objective source, because when you start making these subjective arguments about relationships, whatever, that predicates value onto other human beings. So then you're actually kind of in the same problem as the atheist. You need some kind of transcendental source in order to break out of this loop. Now, the other thing is that as far as the less happy aspect, Candace is right in that males' responses are very important for a woman's happiness. That's just a state of affairs statement, and it is true that women desire families that's been psychologically studied for literally centuries. So that's the breakdown of where we're at right now.
If you're interrupting, so just to connect the dots for you, when women are having sex with multiple partners, it devalues them for men, right?
For men. So,
yes. So
men define a woman's worth.
Well, I would say both of them kind of define one another's worth, because I think the ultimate goal for people to be happy is actually family.
Okay, so you're saying in all cases,
so that like assumes values tied to happiness. That's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
a woman is going to be more fulfilled in regards to family. Like
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And this is going to work in all cases. So you're saying there's no individual case in which a woman can feel, fulfilled without being tied to other people. in the case of things?
I think there could be an exceptional case for everything. I think there are exceptional cases, but I think that if we all start trying to be the exception as opposed to recognizing the rule, which is that people in life are more fulfilled when they achieve a family unit and when they have children, women in particular, especially having aspiring to children, then you are going to end up with a bunch of people who are unhappy because your job cannot replace the feeling of having a family.
So what you're saying is we need to look at every individual case and see what is going to fulfill you or what is going to, I guess, essentially predict your happiness more. Because if we look at, for example, the Nordic countries, right? These are countries, when I'm talking about like Sweden, Denmark, right? These countries tend to be like, I think in the past 14 years, they've been ranked as the highest in happiness and marital satisfaction from women, right? And we see that they also have been the most open in regards to like, sexual norms and sexual roles, right? So, and we also see that there's less rates of like STDs reported. We see more, and that's also due to comprehensive sex education that's pushed in those countries. So we see that and that's like a direct result of the sexual revolution, right? So when we're seeing that direct reports of happiness, right, we don't have these same rates in America. In these countries that are more sexually open, why would we see like those rates in those type of countries?
Because happiness is, well, first of all, it's a very hard thing to measure. I don't see, like, I feel like they're kind of just saying, well, there's a study that says people are happier. It's like, yeah, so how are you going to have a study that can measure someone's happiness? It's not like height. Like, you can put someone onto a measuring stick and measure how tall they are. Happiness is not like that. Like, someone could lie in theory. So, I don't think it really should be based on happiness in the sense of a study. It should be based on happiness in terms of the ultimate goal of humanity, which is tied into the soul, which is to connect with God, and that comes with the ethical responsibility of gender roles. Now, you may think, why do you keep bringing up God? Do you need God to justify this? Well, you need God to justify anything, because this is ethics. Okay, we're not arguing about, well, does water boil at whatever degree Fahrenheit? You can do that through an empirical, observable study. Okay, this is different. These are ethical oughts. Okay, when you bring up a bunch of is statements like women are made to be happy, women have been sexually devalued, these are is statements. And the atheists are obviously making a bunch of is statements as well. You can't get an ought from an is inherently. There has to be a premise in the middle between the is and the ought that says, because of X, Y, or Z, they ought, based on the is. So it has to be like a connecting premise. And the only connecting premise that could possibly work without being a fallacy is a theistic one. So
I think you might be referring to this sort of mass-produced study that was a part of like a behavioral science study, which said that women were the happiest women in the world were women that were actually unmarried and had careers. No, okay, well there was
reported happiness.
Okay, sure. I'm talking about the same thing. It was reported happiness, but it could be there's tons of studies. The point being is that in 2023, there was this massive scandal where they recognize that a lot of these studies that were being produced, behavioral science, was proven to be a complete fraud. And they were unable to reproduce these studies. And they also found that the data had been faked. The data that we can look at that I think shows, and you can let me know if you agree with this, if women, and under the imagination of the feminist umbrella, were really unhappy when they were in the home, and then entering the workforce has made women happier and infinitely feeling more secure about themselves, we could, I think, reasonably expect that there would have been a decrease in suicide rates amongst women.
You would have to go ahead and show how that correlation, right, is going to be a direct cause of women going into the workforce.
Okay.
yeah, but the same thing applies to your happiness argument. So that's a double standard, first of all. And second of all, so this is like Humean skepticism. This is interesting. So Candace has brought an inductive argument where it says, well, if people are happier, they'll be less likely to commit suicide. And I think that's a very reasonable premise. Okay, and this is also something that can't be manipulated via, well, I guess it can't be manipulated by people reporting more suicides than they actually are. So again, that goes back to the study point where it's a bit iffy to base it on empirical studies when we're talking about like it's not meta yet, but ethical questions which hinge on meta-ethical assumptions, because meta-ethics aren't empirical. I feel like I'm nerding out right now, but this is all true. Okay, everything I'm saying is true. So, yeah, I don't know. But I feel like a reasonable person would agree that suicide makes like if you're happier, you'll be less likely to commit suicide. I feel like that's a very reasonable premise. So she's kind of applying human skepticism selectively here to say that, well, how do you know? Can you show a correlation? And you can't deductively show a correlation. So this is true in the sense of it's an inductive argument, not a deductive. You can always take the side of the negative because it's not like it logically necessarily follows. But at the same time, it's like, well, okay, well, we're going to talk about those assumptions, which brings it ultimately to meta territory, and, you know, theism is the only place that can make sense of the meta.
Okay, well, how can we measure? Then you have to give me a way that we can measure happiness. How can we measure happiness? So I would say suicide rates would be a good thing to look at. Drug, alcohol consumption would be
of course, right? But we would have to. We can say, I can say at this point in society, I don't think everyone's happy. I think there's a lot of things that we need to reconcile to society.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right,
So
but we have to look at the cause, right? Why are these things predicted, right?
Yeah.
And for example, if we talk about men, there are a lot of things we can look at, right? That tend to predetermine suicide, right? But we can't say, oh, these two things are happening at the same time. This causes it.
Yes, that's right. But I
That wasn't Candace's argument.
do think that we can objectively say that women who are committing suicide rates more than they were in the 1950s, like it has actually increased marginally. That's not a sign that us entering the workforce suddenly made us
How is
very
it
happy.
cause of the workforce?
We're also binge drinking at a higher rate.
How's this
We're
cause
taking
of
opioids
entering
at a
work-
higher rate?
How is this a cause of entering?
Because I think women are being
You think?
put on a pathway aspirationally.
But you're gonna have to. You're saying you think this, right? But where is?
Okay, yeah. So see, like this is why I was right. Okay, so see how this argument's now getting about, well, I disagree with your fact and I disagree with what you think. That's what you think, whatever. Okay, you need to break this human autonomous loop because now this is just getting annoying.
Where's the cause? Like you're not substantiating a claim. You're saying this is what I think. I'm seeing two.
Okay, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Thank you so much.
Great job. Great job.
That was a great job by neither of them because this is just. I feel like this is going to continue just over and over again.
Hi, I'm Nikki.
Nice to meet you.
So when we're talking about the value of women on a societal scale and how we view each other, right?
No.
When you're-
No. Oh my God. No. Hold on. Let me.
Women.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, I'm Nikki.
Nice to meet you.
So when we're talking about the value of women on a societal scale and how we view each other, right?
No, that's not what we're talking about. Like, when Candace is a Christian, so when she says value, she's referring to, I would hope she's referring to value in the only way you can justify value beyond human opinion. So, oh my God.
When you're devaluing us, you're objectifying us. And follow me, I promise. But rape rates have gone down by about half in the last 20 years, right? So if you're saying we're less valuable now, why wouldn't we be suffering at a higher rate?
So is the argument that you're making, just so I understand, that because women are giving up sex for free, they're not being raped?
Every study shows rape is not correlated with just sexual gratification. It is a power structure.
Okay.
So it is about objectifying and abusing women when you rape them, not about whether or not you want sex. What I am saying is that women are less objectified.
Did she just say, wait, okay, hold on, dude, wait.
That because women are giving up sex for free, they're not being raped?
Every study shows rape is not correlated with just sexual gratification. It is a power structure.
Okay.
So it is about objectifying and abusing women when you rape them, not about whether or not you want sex.
Did she just say that when a man well, they're saying it, so I guess I'm saying when a man rapes a woman, it's not about sex? What? Like, I understand she's making a point about like power and asserting power, but like oh my God, dude. This is
What I am saying is that women are less objectified. So therefore we are being raped less.
Okay, so you
and she thinks women are being objectified less. So yeah, when women walk around in scandalous, whatever word they use, outfits, in public as a result of the sexual revolution, something that would have, been like, let's say America in the 1920s would have been like you just see one woman wearing like an average club outfit today in the 1920s, and every person there would be like, whoa, like what are you doing? Like, so like because you're supposed to be modest, you're supposed to, value yourself. So women are being objectified more. Okay, dude. Back then, yeah, that makes sense.
I think that in today's society, because this is pretty wild for me. In the 1950s, you're saying women were more objectified than today in the land of OnlyFans, the Kardashian clan, and women that are essentially putting up their boobs and butts for free on Instagram. You're saying we finally have achieved less objectification, where women can't even get onto an advertising. You can't even advertise a bag without them having to be naked in order for them to get a career as a model. You're saying, oh great, we've achieved actually less objectification.
So I'm not trying to suggest that I think that the over-commodification of women's bodies is positive. But what I am saying is that when you're going to the 1950s, that we shouldn't put this glazed look of, oh, it was so happy. We had single income households and we got to stay home. We also had a pill popping problem. We also were viewed as maids. Like we were seen as a house appliance far more than we were as people. And so when you have that kind of objectification where you are in a subservient position.
And it doesn't logically follow that the sexual revolution is good from that premise. Like like her argument is basically like, okay, well, women were objectified before because they were viewed as like a kitchen appliance. I would disagree with that premise, but okay, let's grant it. And then you say the sexual revolution has led to less objectification because, well, I mean, it seems like a woman becoming a commodity doesn't really factor into her argument, but it's like, well, because women are now liberated. It's missing the establishing premise of what actually gives a woman value. That's the problem with the argument. So it's retarded, in other words.
I think we're facing a different form today, but I think that rape is a signifier of a contradiction to your statement.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense, but I do want to rebut it on a couple of points. So first, I just want to say, suggesting that objectification has gone downward since the 1950s is wild. That's just a firm no. That is not the truth, and that's not true.
Wait, so do you feel
But
like
hold on, let me answer your second thing. Okay. Second thing, you then brought up, okay, women were at home, but they were.
And the point about the sexual revolution not being a justification is that the sexual revolution doesn't necessarily give value, although under her definition of value, which is dumb, I guess it may. Although the part about women becoming a commodity kind of contradicts it, but whatever. Value can only come from a transcendental source. So again, like, I don't understand these
pill
people's
popping.
arguments. They're very
You then have to acknowledge we're actually popping more pills now, right? So we have actually increased our amount of pill popping. Women are having overdoses on opioids. And on top of that, since I think 1999, by rate, we are increasing our opioid use compared to men. So women are not popping pills less because we're going into the workforce. That's actually not true at all either. We're also, like I said to you, consuming alcohol more. And
yeah, so like that's also just like, even without the studies to back it up, that's just a dumb premise to believe in. Like, so you believe that when women were home and had a pill popping problem, that putting them in a workforce 8 hours a day under the work, which can be very stressful, is going to make it better? Like, are you retarded? Well, I mean, obviously, but
binge drinking more than we did in the 1950s, which is why I was trying to get her to say, we need to look at actually give me any reasonable metric of how we can
I feel like I'm
define
pausing
happiness.
too much, bro. I just want to get this going.
Yes
I feel
or
like I'm
no?
making
But
the
you're,
same
wait,
points
hold
over and
on.
over
We're
again.
actually avoiding what my original point was about rape being the signifier.
Okay, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your
Well, you
seat.
brought up other points.
Thank
so,
you.
Like,
Nice to
of
meet
course
you.
it's going to be responded to. Like, come on.
Hi,
Hi,
I like your hat.
Whitney Shanahan.
Nice to meet you.
I don't like your hat. I don't like your outfit.
I am fascinated by your claim that women have lost happiness since the sexual revolution, since the 1950s. Do you think that there is any tie to happiness and freedom and happiness and choice? Because since 1950s,
Not necessarily.
since the sexual revolution, women have gotten exponentially more freedom and more choice. And for me,
The type of freedom and choice you're talking about are not positives. And also, freedom and choice is like this whole liberal mantra. Freedom and choice isn't necessarily tied to happiness. Now, when it comes to certain things like, do I have the choice to, wake up whenever I want versus I have to wake up at 7 for something I hate doing? Obviously, that will be correlated to happiness. But, it's like, imagine being in an ice cream shop, okay? And you can either have a selection of 10 ice creams or a million ice creams. And you just put it into the room. Like, okay, go pick. Go pick an ice cream. And you have all these like little markers like, oh look, pick this one, pick this one, pick this one. Like, so you see like how more choice doesn't necessarily mean, it's better. Now obviously there's like a spectrum. Having no choice isn't good. Having very limited choice isn't good. There's like a sweet spot where, these type of choices, this range of choices is actually going to facilitate the most happiness. So the argument would be that women have been given too many choices that do not facilitate happiness. The choice range that conservative gender roles give them is the ideal range.
as a mother and as a woman, having the freedom to choose what I do, to make my own destiny, makes me infinitely more happy than, say, back before the sexual revolution when I couldn't get a bank account, couldn't get a home loan, couldn't work outside the home, couldn't travel around without a man, couldn't control my own reproduction. So I feel that happiness, personally, my belief,
can't control
is
my own
tied
reproduction. I need to kill my baby. I need it. That's my right. I need to kill my baby. Unbelievable.
our ability to have freedom. And I think that in the United States, protecting freedom and our individual freedoms is what's going to lead us to happiness.
Did you go to college?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Did you?
Of course you did.
Yes, I did. So you have a degree.
Absolutely.
Now, when you went to college, did you go to college because it was simply something that you wanted to do? Or did you think that I have to go to college because in order to get a job, I have to have a college degree?
I went to college for art because I was fascinated with art.
Okay.
Of course you did.
It's just answering my question. Did you go to college? Was that the only reason you went to college? Or did you think that I might want to do something in art, so I have to go to college, like for my career?
I went to school because I wanted to expand my horizons. I mean, I think that's why most people go to university.
No,
Why did you go?
That's actually not
Why
true. A
did
lot
you
of
go?
I went, and I think a lot of people go because there's a pressure that if you don't go to college, you're going to be a failure.
It's a choice. Everything's a choice. So
Okay.
taking away choices doesn't make people happier. Taking
but
away
that-
freedom doesn't make people happier.
I'm disagreeing with you on the idea that people are feeling more free by financial pressure. I think financial pressure makes people feel remarkably less free.
So you want no bank accounts again? Women not to have credit cards?
I'm
and
not
bank
saying
accounts?
that women shouldn't have access to credit cards or banking accounts. You're putting words in my mouth, so why don't you respond to the words that I'm saying?
Well, less financial pressure. If I don't have a bank account, that's a lot less financial pressure, I guess, right?
Dude, oh my god. Okay, and anyways, also, it's like a flawed premise to say that, well, I believe the sexual revolution was bad. And then you say, well, so you don't support women having bank accounts? Like, that doesn't necessarily follow from the claim. Okay, like, someone could differ in that aspect. Like, you aren't forced into this box. And also, I mean, am I against women having bank accounts? I think it should be different, but I don't think them not being able to have them is that big of a deal in a conservative society, but I think they should be able to open like some kind of different one.
That financial pressure in terms of most people that go to college, and I'm counting myself among them, it's because typically in order to get the job that you're being sold is going to make you infinitely happier and infinitely more free, it just requires a college degree. And most of these people, to be clear, have to put themselves, the majority of people have to put themselves into debt. And I don't think anybody would describe debt as a form of freedom, right? I don't think anybody would realistically say,
Let's get back to happiness. So
No,
we're
no.
here to talk about happiness
No,
and how the sexual revolution, and we're not talking about college debt.
I think it's important because we're talking.
Dude, oh my god. Just one line thinkers can't expand beyond that.
Talking about freedom. You
Unbelievable.
just said that the reason why I feel happy is because I have more freedom. And I am saying that financial restraints and debt doesn't make people feel more free.
So let's
I'm
let's
countering-
eliminate the debt. Let's eliminate college debt. Maybe we should have free college here in the
Okay.
U.S. That sounds great.
So-
Great idea, Candace. I love that idea.
All right.
Okay.
Love it. Champion. Champion for the people.
Girl. Very nice.
All right, return to your seat.
Surrounded is now a podcast, available wherever you listen. Search Surrounded.
Another dude.
My
Oh,
second
Jesus.
claim is that no career will give women as much joy and fulfillment as raising children.
I agree, but this is on mostly. I mean, you can use studies and whatnot, but again, you're gonna have be in this box of study, like my study and your study, whatever. I mean, you need like some. This is like assumes ethical shoulds in some way, so you should have a transcendental basis for it. You can use the studies on top of that, but it should be transcendental first and foremost. Is that Parker? Oh no.
Oh, hi, Candace. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm John. Okay, so I feel like a lot of your arguments today are very rooted in a sort of old school perspective. I have to be honest.
Okay, all right. So here we go with poisoning the well. He's poisoning the well here. So like an old school perspective. That's not a logical argument. That's a rhetorical trick to make. It's like an appeal to antiquity. Like your arguments are old, and because humans have a natural assumption to assume that things that are new are automatically better, he's appealing to that. So he's poisoning the well first and foremost. Should interrupt them and say, give your argument. Don't poison the well. Like, that's.
Like, I think, and I'm not trying to be insulting whatsoever, I feel as though most people would identify that claim as
Most.
pretty extreme and pretty
Most. Okay, appeal to consensus. Two fallacies already, no logical substance.
like,
Children are extreme.
well, no, that women would get more happiness inherently from raising kids than having a job or deciding what they want to do with their lives.
No logical argument.
Why is that? I'm just curious. Why would having children, which is just a natural biological conclusion, be something that sounds extreme?
I just said inherently.
Well, inherently.
That's the
extreme.
inherent expectation.
Yeah.
That's better for
It's inherent because it's biological. So I think when we think about things that are inherent, I think biology is a good thing to start with, right? So biologically speaking, men and women come together, they form families, and that's the reason why you're sitting here. That's the reason that I'm sitting here is because biology is inherent.
Well,
so
I was
saying
told-
That's a
it's
decent
just
inductive argument.
natural order that we're speaking about, right?
Okay, let's break it down. So why do you believe that? Why do you believe that?
Why do I believe that?
Why do you inherently are happier? Yeah.
You keep stressing this word inherent.
She just explained why. And this guy hasn't made an argument yet. You notice that? He has not made a single argument. He made two fallacious appeals. And now he's like being pedantic over the word inherently. And she even justified why she's using the word inherently. So like, what's your argument, bro? Come on, let's go.
Yeah, I think because it speaks to natural order and every piece of life, I think, is enriched by
You
children.
don't think it's natural for women to get to decide what they want to do with their lives?
I do not.
No, that is actually not natural from both the transcendental perspective. And when we say choose what they do, we don't mean like literally slavery as in they can't even drink water unless they're told. Okay, don't be stupid. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about choice, obviously within, a job and all these different kinds of things. I'm not necessarily against like women getting like a waiter job or whatever, but it is better for them to raise children instead of working a job. Right? That's the argument here. So again, don't be stupid. Okay, don't misconstrue anything. But from a transcendental perspective, yes. And from a biological perspective, yes.
Not think that saying women can decide whether or not they want to go to work or have children is problematic. What I'm saying to you is that women will get the most fulfillment from having a family.
Because it's natural.
It's natural, but also children are wonderful and beautiful and spiritually divine creatures. I mean, they're amazing. There's everything about having a child. Yes, it's a lot of work. It's beautiful.
I hear that. Well,
Yeah.
okay, what if there's a little girl born and it's her dream her entire life to be an author or to be, on TV or any of these things? And
Okay, this is appeal to story. Like, what is this guy like a? This guy's worse than Parker and Dean. Is this guy like in the same field? Because now this is an appeal to a story. Like, oh, I'm gonna tell a bad. Like, it's kind of like the argument they made. That one dude made against God. It's like, there was a guy, and he got Ebola, and he crapped out his intestines, and he died. How could God exist? It's like an appeal. That's a story, dude. That's not an argument. Make an argument.
And having children is very expensive. It takes a lot of time. So how is it better for that, like, and I understand this is hypothetical, but that hypothetical little girl to have children than to pursue these things that would make her
She's a little girl, dude. So first of all, she doesn't even know if that's what she wants. And second of all, we don't think little girls should have kids. What are you talking about? This guy is retarded. Everything he said has been stupid. Like,
happy if she gets
I just think that what if she publishes the book and she has a child, she would agree with me that the child was more fulfilling and made her happy. That's what I'm happier than the book did, is what I'm saying. And I say this as a published author of a New York Times. I would choose my children over my best-selling book. And I was that little girl who had a dream that, like, oh, it would be really great if I could share my thoughts and ideas in a book. But it is utter insanity for me to reflect on that and say that I would have rather published Blackout than to have my 3 children.
Well, why is it rather? You see what I'm saying?
It's not rather. I'm just saying
Well, that's
that
your claim. That's your claim, is that it's better.
It will be.
yeah, better doesn't mean rather as in exclusivity. So you don't even understand what the words mean. Like, dude, oh my god, this guy is like the worst one out of all of them. Especially because he's a dude, so he's supposed to be better at these things. Embarrassing.
More fulfilled. Yes.
Right. So rather.
Well, if it's an either or, if you're saying it's an either or, I'm just saying that if these two things have happened in your life, the thing that will bring you more spiritual fulfillment will be children. And so women who are neglecting that, who are neglecting the pathway to, strive toward family because they think their career is going to hug them at night, or they think that when they're on their deathbed, their career is going to come up next to them and say, you were so great to me. I think that they've stepped into a delusion, and I'm hopeful that they wake up from it before it's too late.
All right, pause. Yeah. Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
This guy made 0 arguments and 0 kind of like you're clapping. Great job. You did nothing. Like literally nothing. Intellectually, you did nothing. Unironically.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, so currently women make up about 47% of the workforce. If this were the case and that women were just inherently unhappy or unfulfilled working and would just prefer to be at home, why don't they?
Because it's
propaganda.
We've made that due to prior feminist waves nearly impossible, because now, which I believe the reason that the government wanted women to enter the workforce is because it gave them an opportunity to tax a household twice. And so this goes back to what I was saying, is that there's a lot of financial pressure that is being exerted on young women to enter the workforce, and they do so blindly under this illusion that somehow entering the
that fact check's retarded, by the way.
Workforce is going to make you more fulfilled, like getting yourself into 6 figures of debt, going to college to then take on a career and be
like humans do a lot of things now, and even the liberals would agree with this, out of their best interest because they're told things that aren't true and they get brainwashed. Like, so what's you don't even agree with the logical inference
having to pay student loans
so
while you make 35K is going to make you happier, and I'm saying that isn't actually true.
Okay, so I hear that.
Yeah.
At the same time, would you not agree that women can both have a career and have children? I mean,
okay, here's this argument. So the point is that having a career takes away from being able to have children, and it also assumes this kind of, I need a job, I need a job, I need it. Like when I tell you, say I want a conservative woman just wants to stay home, and they're like, what if she wants to work a job? It's like, well, what if she wants to work a job and raise her kids? It's like, why would she be so attached to a job? Like, it's such a stupid assumption. Because, like, what does everyone say? Like, literally everyone and a dog say, oh, I hate my job. This job sucks. I wish I could just do whatever I want. I wish I could retire. And then I say, hey, I want a woman that doesn't have a job and, stay home. And they're like, what if she wants the job? It's like, dude, how deep is this propaganda and brainwashing going in? It's so retarded. It doesn't make
you
sense.
are actively doing that right now.
And I want to be very clear, because I am actively doing it right now. I would be someone that you would call an exception because I get to work from home. I get to wake up in the morning. I don't have a boss, right? I don't have to go into the office from 9 to 5. I get to then therefore spend the...
And also, I think there's a bit of a contradiction in, like, conservative influencing women and I think it's okay given the circumstances we're in life right now, but also, like, it would make more sense if you stayed home and didn't put yourself out on the internet. Although, I understand times are a bit different right now, and we kind of need all the voices we can get, so I'm not going to get too pedantic about that.
Entire morning with my children.
So you're an exception, and the 47% of women that make up our labor force are also an exception?
No, the exact opposite. So I'm trying to make it more realistic because I think it's really bad form when people who are able to stay at home, right, and are able to start working at 1:00 p.m. as I do after being around their children. The children are running around all day. Will then preach to you that every woman can have this. That's not the reality. The reality is that the overwhelming majority of people are stuck behind a desk all day, and they're not happy. They're not doing work that gratifies them at all, and at the same time, they're suspending.
Well, that's just what career you've chosen, but I think that the issue with your
work a 9 to 5, I think that's
okay. Yes, but
right?
if it's the job that is making them unhappy, then maybe they should have chosen a different career path and not the structure of the career itself. But my issue with this is that not only is it claiming that women can't both be mothers and have jobs, which we know to be true because millions of women do that. My mother does that. You are actively doing it right now. But it also is qualifying what every single woman in this country wants without any clear evidence. I mean, there's 169 million women in this country.
Yeah, so this is why, so this is a decent point. That's why you have to make a transcendental argument beyond human autonomy.
How can you say that you know exactly what...
That's a good question. How do you have access to universals about other people's mental state? That's a great question. But only one worldview has the answer, which is the Christian worldview. So, yeah, you certainly can't answer that. And even when you say people give them a choice. Well, how do you know people want a choice? You're assuming the same thing you're criticizing Candace for. You're assuming you have access to other people's mental states, which is a universal statement. And there's only one way to ground universal, which is with Christianity, so that's why you have to make a transcendental argument.
What every woman secretly wants. Are you asking?
That wasn't my claim that I secretly know what every single woman wants. I'm saying that if you measure up at the end of your life, what brought you more fulfillment, your career or a children, raising children in your family, we will discover that, and there actually have been studies, people that have gone to people on their deathbeds, and the number one regret that people had was that they gave too much to their careers. And this includes men, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, of course, human relations.
The top 5 regrets with Bonnie Ware. Who the hell cares what Bonnie Ware says?
Is going to be valued over money and profit.
So then
but
you
at
don't
the same time, what does that even
with my argument?
I do
at all.
disagree with
You're
your
agreeing with my
yes,
argument.
Humans prefer humans over a job, but that's not just singular to women. That's everyone. And my question is, what does that even have to What is the goal of that? Should every woman quit working and just have a child?
Well, I'm just trying to warn you that if you decide to suspend that pursuit of family because you think that you have to first climb the ladder,
why is everyone
a lot of women
stupid?
make that mistake and they don't end up finding a partner.
But that's their right. It's free will.
You
We
would
live in a
definitely
free
have a
country.
right to make
You
a
don't get to
mistake.
say what people should and shouldn't do.
Well, why should people have rights on your atheist, secular worldview? There is no value, there is no right. So what are you talking about? You should have rights. Should why anything? Okay? Why should anything, dude? Like, come on, let's go.
I don't think my claim is this is what people should or should not do. I'm just simply stating that my claim is that
okay, that's stupid. Okay, well, why wouldn't it be a should? You're in a debate and you're arguing. It's premised on the whole thing that, people should agree with a good argument and should agree with what I'm saying because what I'm saying is true. So, I don't agree that. I don't like this whole, secular or common ground, let's take God out of it debating format because it doesn't work. Because you see me pointing out all the problems with both of their arguments. It can only be solved with a theistic position.
Be more fulfilled if you focus on
You don't
trying
get to
to
decide what other people are fulfilled by.
Okay, I'm making my claim here that women are infinitely more fulfilled in the household and raising children than they are taking that 9 to 5 job.
But you have no evidence of that. In fact, you are evidence against your own claim.
I'm not evidence against my own claim.
You are.
I'm saying
you're
that
at work right now.
I've literally said, I am telling you, women cannot have it all. That is an illusion, and that is an illusion that is stressing women out. And I think it is the reason why so many women are turning to popping pills, why there's been such a significant, more than 1,000% increase since 1999.
But men can have it all. Men can be fathers and have a job, but women can't do that.
I don't think you can have it all.
It sounds like
yes, because men are different, gender roles. Okay, like that's the whole assumption behind this. Like, why would you assume Candace is an egalitarian, you retard? Like, obviously.
Devaluing women. I think that women can do
No,
everything
it
that a man
sounds like
can
women
do,
is
and
our-
men have done this historically throughout time and
It is,
memoriam.
I think women is our debate topic today. So
Okay, again,
women
presupposition.
exist in a society with men. We are comparing
women are
and
trying
men.
to be both women and men, and that is why women are unhappy today, is because actually what's quite ironic about the feminist movement is
I
that
think women are just trying to be people.
I think women have been taught that being a
They're just trying to be people. I'm assuming a bunch of things I can't ground.
woman is not enough,
just
and that you have to
cancer,
also
dude.
aspire to be a man.
And this
that's
is
the
where my
irony.
malding
it's like a
comes in,
psychological
'cause now
conditioning.
it's just the
What
same thing over
feminists
again.
went
It's
out
just
and
a bunch
did and
of stupid
said is that in
things,
order
okay?
for
I don't
women to
care
have
about
value,
you.
women need to be like
You have
men.
nothing interesting to
And I'm
say,
saying
Taylor.
that
Blondie.
Kids are always going to be important because I get
Amber
what you're saying
Rose,
where a
let's
woman
go.
can write a book and have kids, but the kids are always going to make her happier. But I think it just means that kids are always going to be more important, not necessarily make you happier. But also piggybacking on Naima, we don't live in an economy where people typically can have a one-income household, right?
Okay, that has nothing to do with an ethical should. Okay, that's a different claim. Right, now you're claiming, no, you're making an argument about the utility of something, but when the claim was an ethical one. So that's two different things.
Whether it be the mom or dad that stays home. And so I think, and you keep bringing up the 1950s, which
this was right before the fact.
I just don't know if that's the period of time that you want to go back to.
No, it's just I'm just going back to the first wave of
But
feminism.
you want to undo progress that's been done. So I'm curious as to what decade you'd be comfortable living in, especially as a Black woman.
That is a sleight. I don't think she's smart enough to do a sleight of hand, but that's a sleight of hand to the argument because that's not actually what the claim is. She's saying that, oh, well, do you actually want to go back to the 1950s? It's like, that's not really the point. The point is that the sexual revolution added on things that were bad. That doesn't necessarily, this is kind of something, that doesn't mean necessarily before it was perfect, and I perfectly agree with that. That is not a part of the claim. Now, if she expands and says, okay, that is a part of the claim, then it now is. But that's not inherently part of the argument that she presented. So, yeah, I don't think they're smart enough to do this, but it's like it's very sneaky sleight of hand.
Okay, so we're gonna park aside the race politics because I want to focus on.
Okay, then as a woman, what period of time do you want to go back to?
Just as a woman, I think that it was probably a better environment for women when we understood that raising our children was fulfilling.
But some women still do understand that.
Right.
And a lot of women,
and I'm one of them.
And I'm here advocating for you to be able to live the life that you want and for other women to be able to live the lives that they
Do you
want.
have children?
God,
No.
don't
Okay,
let
you
me
have a
explain
career.
why that's
Yeah.
retarded,
Okay,
bro.
what do you work in? What field do you work in?
I do hair.
Okay, wonderful. So
You do hair? With what? You do hair. Yeah, with your with your Amber Rose haircut.
have both children and a career, as somebody pointed out. And so the fact that I'm saying that you will be infinitely more fulfilled at the end of the day by raising your children than you will be if you come home and you say, wow, I really crushed it dyeing somebody's hair today. What is it exactly that makes you angry about hearing that? Like that's what I'm actually trying.
Nothing makes
I'm
me
trying
angry.
to get. I'm
No,
trying
that's
to
just
get
it.
to
You know
the.
what,
I'm
Karen?
trying
No,
to
but
get to the
that's-
implicit
but
revolution.
That's the thing is that no one
when
is
someone
angry.
mentions children.
No, see, no one's angry when you mention children. I get angry, I guess, when you mention that someone should have a children or you're trying to impose a lifestyle onto people that you want.
Yeah, should. That's why you need to make it transcendental, bro. So, yeah, these are should statements. That's true.
To live, which I think is kind of funny because as someone who's anti-feminism, you practice it more than most women do. I mean, every time you get on your podcast, every time you collect a check, you're practicing feminism.
Okay, and that's what you think.
No, that's what it is. Because
actually-
without feminism,
I think that's true, but again, I think this is where utility kind of meets with ethicality. It's like, okay, well, what is ultimately the best for this ethical statement of women should stay home? It's like, well, female role models, they aren't complete degenerates, although ideally, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have this in the first place. So I think she's actually making a good point. You know, you kind of are benefiting from the feminist movement. Candace should go back and say we're in a special time where, you know, we're in a culture that makes this problem. Although she did make a good point about being able to work from home. So it's a bit of a crossroads where the point this is probably the best point they can make, and it's not that strong, but you know, they're coming from a place that makes sense.
You wouldn't be able to exist.
Yeah, people keep saying, I hate when people say that.
But it's
because
just the
it
truth.
just shows that you haven't done the research to even understand where the
Or you don't know history.
which was discovered. That's what I'm saying about you, because it means that you don't understand that a bunch of government officials in the CIA funded the feminist movement. So for all of your hatred for the patriarchy,
I'm so confused.
and
So
speaking
my
about
question
men,
is it bad that they
I mean, I feel that's kind of orthogonal to the point that was being made. I mean, the point is that if you were in the 1950s and whatnot, and you were like a woman, you started a political podcast, everyone would go like, what? What are you doing? Like, sweetie, you know, the kitchen needs to be clean. So that's the point they're making. That's true. It's I don't think you can get around that. And again, like I said, I support Candace Owens. I think she's cool. But that's just
or bad that it just
and
happened?
men wanted women to go into the workforce. The government, which had a lot of men, it was being.
Are you talking about because World War II occurred and we had to
No,
go
I'm
to
talking-
factories, and then when we left the factories,
No,
they
it's
forced
not
us back
talking
into the homes?
That's
Not
not what I'm
talking
saying
about
at all. So let me tell you what I'm saying, and then you can respond to it.
Go for it.
Gloria Steinem is considered to be a feminist icon, right? Because she led these protests. She also had a bunch of music festivals. She got students involved. It is just a fact that Gloria Steinem was funded by the CIA. Okay. The CIA,
This is a good point.
the
This is a good point. Your
male-dominated
whole
CIA
movement is funded by the
of
government.
the
that
50s
you
and the 60s
also
funded those
say,
movements.
This is a bad thing. The government, no, we need to change the government. Like, the government gave you your movement, dude.
So what do you think was the explicit aim? Do you think it was because the government really wanted you to be more free, that they wanted to encourage women to enter?
Well, I have to be honest with you, I couldn't speak on behalf of the government.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And what their intention
Well, I think it's important
was
because you
with
just said that I don't know history, and I think it's pretty important if you're going to sit across from me and say I don't know history, that you learn a
but-
piece of history and then question
well-
it.
You keep bringing up men, and I think it's funny because we should talk about men more. Like you brought up suicide, they're 4 times more likely to kill themselves.
Which is why I
And while women, we're twice as more often on antidepressants, but that's because we go out and do what we need to do to keep coping.
we're not happy.
And we need to focus on men and the patriarchy.
Okay, so you say that women are more fulfilled at home with kids than going out into the workforce or getting educated, but that just really doesn't bear out when you look at the stats, when you look at how working.
You get piped on the internet for a bunch of dudes to watch. Okay, you have lost all your rights to debate and argue. Okay, let's
Mothers are way less likely to be in poverty. Maternal education is the #1 predictor of childhood outcomes, better scores, getting higher incomes in the future, fewer behavioral problems, better mental health.
I didn't
So
know she had a lisp. She's a lisp.
it's weird to me and college educated women are least likely to get
Least likely to get divorced.
divorced. And they're the only women, the top 10% of women are the only women whose marriage rates are going up. So they're getting married. They're staying
Okay, yeah,
married, and their kids are
shotgunning,
doing
shotgun
better. When you look
facts,
at
cool,
stay-at-home
bro.
mothers, you see that they're more likely to report being depressed. They're more likely to report having anxiety and anger and all these
Shotgunning.
types of things. So how can you say that? Seems like a woman, if you want to get married and have kids, you should go to college and have a career.
So it sounds to me like we are looking at totally different statistics, because everything that you said, I've actually read the exact opposite.
I'm glad we're on a fact check show with you.
Right, exactly.
Oh, it's so exciting.
That's going to be
Well, no, because the studies contradict. You can bring up studies about almost any subject. You can bring up studies that contradict each other. So that's one of the problems with studies. That's the problem with fact checking. Like, oh, this study. It's like, okay, well, there's studies that contradict that study. It's because studies aren't this magical, like, oh, study, you know? Oh my God, the study said. It's like, no.
amazing. Okay. Because I know, like I said, I think what we're talking about is that there was this widespread report on female happiness, and I know that it was formally debunked, and it was.
That's not what I'm talking about. Pew Research,
Right.
University of
Okay.
California. In fact, we're
University of California. Yeah, very reliable research institutions. There's totally not scientific studies they've done that are completely wrong, funded by governments and our propaganda.
working mothers today spend more time with their children than women did in the 1960s that were at home.
Okay, well, women that are at home are obviously spending more time with their children than the people who are at work.
And their
today.
children are not faring off any better, and they're faring off worse.
How are you measuring their children faring off worse?
How likely they are to higher incomes, better scores, fewer health problems, fewer behavioral issues, and better mental.
So
Okay, yeah, those things, that's like the behavioral problems, that's influenced by other things. And then also, like, they make more money. Well, I wonder if that's inflation adjusted, first of all. And also, you have to understand that there's a wider spread in now as opposed to before in terms of people's income. But also, that kind of is gone from what is actually the human purpose and what the soul desires. The soul desires communion with God and alignment to the higher self, which is a product of God's will in terms of what God knows is best for you and what God tells you is best for you. So this is why secular systems don't work. They make all these dumb assumptions that just aren't true, and they can't ground them.
Just to get back to the claim that I'm making here is that it is obvious that women who have children are going to be more fulfilled.
How is
right?
that obvious? Because you said
Good question.
No, it's not obvious because I said so. It's because when you look at all the statistics in terms of women who are choosing not to have families, they are, as the person who just
Yeah, so again, I mean, I feel like, is she gonna go with like Humean skepticism? Because like, why? That's a good question. Okay, bring up a study. Now is she gonna say, well, why? I have my own studies, and is this gonna become a autonomous loop between humans, which can only be broken by a transcendental source? Again,
sat here before you mentioned, they are suffering from more depression. They're suffering from more anxiety. And
that's not true.
Okay, it is true. It is actually true that women who are choosing their careers over starting families are finding themselves leaning more onto medicines like Xanax, anxiety-inducing medicines, and depression because they suspended that time frame where women really should be looking to find a partner and to start a family because they were instead pursuing their careers.
And why are they better off?
It is a dishonest, it's totally a dishonest narrative that men and women want the same things out of life. We don't. We absolutely do not want the same things out of life. In fact, we don't even measure, we don't.
Yeah, we don't. Like, this guy's like, the guy who made literally no argument and said a bunch of fallacies and stupid things. Like, looks like a 70s porn star with this mustache. Like, dude, come on, John. John, come on, let's go. Like, gotta get this working.
Even measure success the same. Men and women don't even measure success the same.
So,
okay?
but tell me how the women who are working and getting educated, why are they faring off better in all of these?
I am telling you that I do not believe they are faring off better in all of these measures. I do not.
Because of what?
I am telling you that we are looking at totally opposite statistics. Like, so you're sitting here telling me that the statistics show that women who are working are producing better children, but I am saying that women that grow up in a two-family home where the mother stays at home are faring off better than the children who are being raised in an environment
where the women are working,
where both of the parents are working away from the home. I do get to work from home.
No. But
that's the irony. That's
I've
why
watched
I
your
said
show.
I'm
You talk about all the nannies you hire, and it's so hard to find a good nanny.
I talked about all of the nannies I hired.
Yeah, you have.
I spoke about how difficult it was to find a babysitter who knew how to cook a meal, and that's because
you don't need a babysitter. You could retire right now.
To let people respond to you when they're speaking.
You don't want to.
Respond to you when
you don't want to. You want to be working, which is great.
You're telling me what I want now and then accusing me of telling you.
Wait, you don't want to work?
Can you just let me finish? Because you've said so many words that what you're trying to do here, like your argument style, is I'm going to say so much and not let her get a word in and then walk away.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier.
We're not having a conversation because you've not letting me respond to one of your points. Okay. What I am saying to you, first to answer what you just said, which was a lie, what I spoke to you about on the weekends is that it's been increasingly difficult to find a 25-year-old who even knows how to make boxed macaroni and cheese, right? And that's crazy. That is in large part due to feminism. Women don't even focus. Like there's this idea that women shouldn't be cooking. Like there's something fundamentally.
That's true. No, what she's saying is true. Why are they laughing? Like, women suck at cooking now compared to before. I can say that from my postare. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I know how to spell it, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Whatever the word. Whatever, based on prior knowledge, my personal experience, women suck at cooking now. And that's because cooking is seen like a stigma. So when I say, well, I want my wife to cook, it's like, just like that. So again, propaganda, brainwashing. It's like the Pavlovian condition. Like, you hear a woman cooking and then you soy face. Immediately.
Wrong with women even learning how to cook.
Are you
know what I mean?
Spending as much time with your children as you possibly can, because that's the way to get the most fulfillment.
No, and that's what I'm trying to say. I am speaking to you
then stop.
Okay, could you please?
Okay, yeah, she's doing this thing where she's making it a binary she's making a spectrum into a binary. That's a fallacy.
Please let somebody get in.
I did.
Word edgewise.
Bimbo Daffy Duck. Daff- Daffy Duck voice, bimbo face, big titties. That's all you have to offer.
Actually have not let anybody finish. And like I said, it's no one
I let you finish. I let you finish.
benefits when you're just speaking over me and not allowing me to respond.
that's funny.
All you're proving is that you have an attitude and you
Okay, can
believe
you
in
address the
feminism,
point now?
but you're not. You see, that's what I'm saying. You just have an attitude, and it's not
Trying
cute.
to-
It's performative.
I love if
I'm
you
actually
address my point. I will be quiet if you address my point.
Does anybody actually feel here that I am being allowed to? Fair point.
really weird.
Fair point.
Whatever.
We live under a matriarchy, not a patriarchy.
That's true. It's true because women, like you always hear husbands going like, "Oh, well, my wife said, my wife this, my wife that." It's like, you're the man. Like, make some decisions. I'm not saying don't factor in your wife at all and forget about her. You know, you should do things in her best interest. But sometimes she's gonna say things that aren't in her best interest, and then you have to do what's in her best interest regardless of that. Because you're the man, you're the leader. You have to make these type of decisions.
Hi, hello.
Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Princella, the Queen Maker.
Love that.
So you say we live.
That, like, she actually a woman? Because, like, that is a deep voice for a woman. That's
In a matriarchy.
Right.
Can you give me the definition of patriarchy?
Yes. Well, the patriarchy is the idea that
that's a
the
very weird
system,
question
our
to
system in
start
America,
with.
is
I
being
don't know if she's asking that for a rhetorical point to set up her argument, or she doesn't know what it means. I assume it's rhetorical to like set up what she's going to say after this.
being run by men, and that women are having to exist under a system that immediately disadvantages them because men are behind it. And I disagree with that pointedly. I think actually we're living in a society where people are being very much influenced socially and politically by women.
Okay, so the denotative definition of patriarchy is father rule, and where positions of government are held majorly by men, where women are largely excluded. So 125 House of Representatives are female, and that's only about 25%.
Right.
And only about 28% make up Senate, and 3.3% of
Okay, so now she's doing this thing where I have stats, I have numbers, 0.2% or whatever. You know, it's like, well, no, we don't work totally off of denotative definitions. I mean, if you make an argument and someone changes the definition of a word you're using, then that is a straw man now. So, from a philosophical perspective, what she's saying right now doesn't matter because she already defined what she means by patriarchy. Now, there is a line to where it's like, I can't say a noodle is referring to a plane, right? But I would say, I mean, most people would agree with the definition Candace just brought. When you started making this denotative, like actually, denotatively, I'm the queen, Princella. Denotatively, it means father rule. It's like, okay, well, you're not responding to the argument now, you're just talking.
Congress up until this date have ever been women. So by denotative definition, we literally live in a patriarchy.
Yes. So I disagree with that. So I think what this gets to, which is actually an important part of the conversation, is that people always think that where there is disparity, there's somehow inequality. And I actually reject that entirely. I think it's just a difference in what we're interested in. I think we're biologically wired. We're interested in different careers. And just because if we looked in the fashion industry and said, oh, well, it's being dominated by women, it wouldn't mean that, okay, well, that means that the fashion industry is a matriarchy and men have no sense. It just means have no ability to communicate how they feel in the fashion industry. I literally think that those numbers show that we're just biologically different. So I actually think politically, women have shown that they have a lot more power than men have. And I'm talking about just in terms of political movements. The most recent I can think of is the Me Too movement, right? If a bunch of women get together and complain about a man and refer to the patriarchy and scream, generally speaking, and let me know if you agree, the media will celebrate that. If a bunch of men got together and were shrieking and speaking about women, generally speaking, the media would call them all white supremacists and say that we had a misogyny problem and that things were really wrong in society. Women are allowed to be more vocal in general about problems than men are.
Well, let me speak to that. When we're talking about government and media, these are two different things. So under the denotative definition of a patriarchy, by the percentages that are occupied in the government, which is in the
cool, you have a
majority
denotative
male
definition, but
defines us
like
as a
you're-
patriarchy.
But that's not how the word patriarchy is used in the arguments. Be using a commonly known connotative definition. If that is, I'm assuming that's a denotative definition. I mean, I assume she wouldn't lie about that. So it doesn't matter. Okay? She can rephrase her point, because like this is actually a sense reference. Okay, so she's referring to, I guess in this case, an object. An object is that, well, females have more power than men in this way. Like an example would be what she just brought up. That's the object. Now, if she uses the words matriarchy and patriarchy, and then you disagree about those words, she can just change the words and refer to the same object. She's referring to an object that has been made clear. So you should be responding to the object. That's what you're supposed to do in philosophy. Just because she uses a sense that denotatively is a bit ambiguous, given what the point she's trying to make. Okay, not only can she just rephrase it, but also like, this is sophistry, and she probably doesn't understand that. But it's not.
Now, when it comes to for capitalism, for marketing purposes and control, for capital and revenue, that is a totally different conversation. But who's making the laws? I don't think that women are the ones voting to have their reproductive rights taken away, where you have rape, incest, and all of these things excluded to force women to be able to. I don't think women in government would largely vote against their own interests because it's majority male. Patriarchy.
I think love that point. Are women allowed to vote?
Oh, of course they are.
Who's voting that patriarchy in then, out of curiosity?
No, I totally agree. And you want to know why? Because there are so many women who think like you. You submit to the idea.
Oh my god, the lack of self-awareness is just insane, dude. Like, oh my god, you think most women are conservative? Like, are you kidding me? Like, are you retarded? Oh
Of men ruling everything. And your ideology is spread across a lot of women who also falsely believe to vote against their own interests.
So Candace Owens is now like every woman. Bro, 90% of the time I see women, probably 99. I can't think of a single woman that has said things positive about Candace Owens. Every single woman I've seen talk about Candace Owens calls her like a pick-me. Like, are you kidding me? Like, is this really the argument to come up with? Like, you just completely deny reality and just have your eyes covered. Like, oh, well, we're actually the minority. We're the minority. I like being a minority. I like being a minority. Like, are you kidding me?
To complain about it in the end. You earlier you said that, women would be much more happier working at home. But don't you agree that it's human nature?
Let's just go to a guy. It's just dumbest point you could possibly make, bro. I'm just so tired of this. And now it's not even
as a matter of fact, right? This is a descriptive claim about the culture, reality we live in, and patriarchy being a system in which men hold the predominance of power in both political.
Dude, she's referring to an object with a sense. Okay, sense. Reference, referring to an object. Okay, it's obvious the object she's trying to refer to. That has been made clear in argument. So when you keep coming up with these denotative, well, patriarchy is actually like, okay, you're missing the point of the argument. Okay? What matters more in an argument is the proposition, not the words you use. Okay? Now, it's not to say words don't matter. Rhetoric matters. Okay? For you to be understood. And you can make an argument like, well, you should, use words to make it more clear. Whatever. But it's obvious what a proposition is. It's just the words are not, you don't see eye to eye on the words. There's an argument about semantics, okay? You donut. It's not rocket science.
Economic and social methods of organization. So S&P 500 companies, 90% of CEOs are men. Board members, 70% of CEOs are men. 70% of congressional members are men. Now, you may provide some sort of naturalistic argument to why that is, but what you're essentially arguing then is that there's a natural patriarchy, which I think feminists would all disagree with. We think that there's a clear social pressure as to why this is.
Yeah, why do you think this? Where do you think the social pressure comes from, you idiot? Like,
and part of the evidence for that is since feminism's arise within our public culture, we've now seen an explosion of women entering these fields, but we have a long way to go. But fundamentally, the claim regarding patriarchy or matriarchy, we are so much closer to where we were just a few decades ago or a couple generations ago where women couldn't hold a credit card than a system where men can't hold a credit card. We're still much closer to that form of society.
Why would you say that we're closer to that? What do you mean by that? Did you just qualify that?
Because in terms of economic power, so for example, household wealth, women own 55 cents to every dollar a man owns.
Who controls household spending though? So you talk about how the money's made in America. How is it being spent? Who spends it?
So it's primarily spent by women, as you've noted, but then the money where the profit's being generated, it's being generated by men.
Would you rather be the people that are spending and deciding on what the money's being spent on, or would you rather be the person that's just working to earn that?
CEOs and board members aren't working; they own the shares, and they're making the profit.
Well, when you own profit is making.
You would much in a capitalist system by definition.
The stupidity of these people is annoying me. Like, okay, some of you guys might not understand why what he said was so stupid, but just think about what he said, okay? He just made a point about the wage gap. Like, oh, the wage gap. Women have so little money compared to men. And then makes a point of, okay, well, women spend the money. And then he's like, yeah, but the CEOs. Dude, you just used a stat that refers to general population, and she makes a point that refers to general population, then you make it about CEOs. You are an idiot. Okay? Like, what is wrong with these people? Like,
you would much rather be making the profit than spending.
I would much rather be spending your money than having to work for your money. Just so we are totally clear here, I would much rather spend your money than have to go out and earn your money.
Well, you're talking about wage laborers in terms of working, but in terms of
no, I'm talking about spending power, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay,
but that matters. If 85% if 85 cents of
the wealth doesn't matter if you don't spend it, moron. Okay, if you have $100 and you don't do anything with it, it is about as good as $0. Now, you can make an argument that makes you more financially secure, but in terms of actual results, real world, if you have $100 and you tuck it in a corner and never use it and put it under the cupboard and you leave it there for hundreds of years, that is as valuable as $0. Because money, the value comes from its usage, you idiots.
every dollar, how that's being spent, is being determined by women. That's power. That we can't say spending power is not power.
Why do you think that is the case? It's because women are often relegated to the role of doing grocery shopping, etc. Because for millennia now, millennia up until now, women were unable to enter the workforce and have economic political.
Yeah, again, it's also kind of getting to the point Candace is making. Like, the point she's making is about female representation in terms of, who should we care about the desires of? That's the proposition she's making. And these people are getting too caught up in the semantics of it. Like, the denotative, the government, whatever. It has nothing to do with the proposition being made.
Get into the reasons, because you brought up something, that men are the people.
And even when they bring up the government reason, that's retarded too. Like, the whole point about money or whatever, it's like, it's better to work for the money than to spend the money. It's like, are you an idiot?
People that are at the top of these companies, these Fortune 500 companies,
and political power.
You're absolutely right. Why is that?
It's primarily because the women haven't broken the ceiling quite yet in terms of meeting men in terms of parity with these sort of powers. But what we've seen with the explosion of feminism is that women have actually begun to enter these companies, have risen into both political and economic positions of power. But that continues to grow year by year, which shows that these social pressures are actually breaking apart as soon as feminism comes into play.
So what I would say is what that shows you is that women and men have different interests. And I think this gets into what I was saying, that just because you see a disparity does not mean that it's not just a disparity in what our interests are. That's what's being represented. I don't know why there has been this idea that women should want to aspire to work 80 hours a week in order to be on par with men.
Do you think that interests are innate, or do you think
I think the interests are innate.
So why is it then that, for example,
interests aren't exclusively innate, but they are heavily influenced by, they're heavily innate, not fully.
In the 1980s,
but also it's true that appealing to interests are extensions of innate desires, but they are not necessarily innate.
Quarter of college graduates were women, where now majority of college graduates are women. That shows that because of the way that social pressures have actually changed, women's interests.
There's social pressures for them to go to college, you retard.
Are actually now changing too. A majority, I think, or at least half of law school graduates are now women. It used to be the case for example, a few hundred years ago that a lot of primary philosophers like Immanuel Kant, Hegel, didn't even believe women could be reasonable. Now here you are today doing a debate.
Hey, I'm not saying anything, dude.
With me, where we're using logic and reason to get to the.
Well, clearly not using much logic and reason.
Absolutely.
And nobody here would dismiss the claim that you.
And also, I feel like you're kind of taking what Hegel and Kant said. And by the way, I think Hegel and Kant had a lot of dumb ideas. Kant had a pretty cool like formulation of transcendental argument, which he actually used for Christianity. Obviously, it's very different, but the form is very similar. But they're speaking about wholes, and then you make a point about a part. It's like, well, a part doesn't define the whole, and the whole doesn't define the part. So even you bring up Candace doesn't mean anything, philosophically. Like, rhetorically, it seems like, oh my god, but philosophically, it doesn't matter.
You can't be rational or logical or be, for example, a great lawyer because you're a woman.
Right. So I totally agree with you that women, but I think they have actually entered into the workforce. I mean, entered into college under this external pressure of feeling that if you don't go to college, you're going to be a failure.
So I disagree. Are a part of the way interests work.
Yes, but we're disagreeing on where the pressure is coming from. Like, I think that now the pressure is that if a woman doesn't enter the force, there's no longer this idea that, okay, we're going to come together as a family, whereas there was this reality that there was this understanding that you would have a partner. People were getting married when they were 18, 19 years old.
Right.
Our grandparents, now it's because of feminism. And I'm saying this is the downside of feminism. Women no longer have that sense. They think that if they have to be pressured to go take out a loan to go to college, and then you have the pressure.
With regards to human trafficking, 70% of human trafficking victims are women. So we're seeing a very clear issue of men being violent towards women. And then when we look at the way that our government handles that, 1 out of 3 rapes go reported. And then out of the ones that go reported, 7% end in jail time. So if we're looking at that, or we're looking at the fact that our government doesn't really get that worried about male violence.
Well,
and it doesn't get that.
So what I would say is, going back to biological differences, men are naturally inclined more towards aggression than women are. So I have not.
Dude. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Adam. Nice to meet you.
So your claim is, just to be clear, that we live in a matriarchy, right?
Yes.
So I think even you would agree that on a global level, that's obviously ridiculous when there are countries where people literally are honor killed for like Instagram posts. But even if we're talking about just the US, right? We don't have paid maternity leave. Abortion is illegal in over a dozen different states.
They literally aren't engaging with the proposition that Candace made clear. They literally aren't engaging with the proposition. They're referring to their misunderstanding of the semantics used. They're not using the proposition/object that's being put forth. And this is like a basic philosophical error.
And as someone earlier was mentioning, women are overwhelmingly the victims of sexual violence and domestic abuse. So that doesn't seem like a very
that has nothing to do with Candace's point. That's nothing to do with Candace's
designed matriarchy where women are victims or, lacking power in so many different realms of society on like a structural level.
I just do not think that women are lacking power on a structural level because they can't, which they can, by the way.
Capacity to be conscious, aware, anything else, should have the same rights, same bodily autonomy as a woman. That is an obvious. I mean, you're making my point for me. That
you're actually making a point that people who are, are born with tremendous disabilities should just be killed because of cognitive functions and ability.
I don't remember saying that. When did I say that?
The best argument, which again, this is sidetracked.
You're saying that
let's get back on track.
Matriarchy, where women are victims or lacking power in so many different realms of society on like a structural level.
I just do not think that women are lacking power on a structural level because they can't, which they can, by the way, abort their children. Is that like one of your components? Is that
there's many states where abortion is illegal? Do you dispute that?
I am going to dispute that having a child is somehow something that restricts women in any capacity. Like you're saying that.
What about the ability to decide what you do with your own body?
I don't believe that I don't believe that murder is something that you should be allowed to decide.
Sure, and murder is illegal.
It's actually what you're doing to somebody else's body. So I'm pro-life. So the argument that, well, women will only be free if they're able to kill off their own offspring to me is
that's a really
extremely off-colored.
Well, I guess if you
argument for me.
frame it that way, everyone kind of has to agree with you. But when we're talking about abortion, when 99% take place in the first few weeks, when there's no thalamus, there's no cortex, there's no capacity for consciousness in the fetus that's developing, saying that fetus that has no capacity to be conscious, aware, anything else,
It has a human nature, and a human nature is what makes murder wrong. Now you may say, well, grounding, Christianity, transcendental. How do you ground that it's not wrong? How do you ground your ethics? You can't.
have the same rights, same bodily autonomy as a woman. That is an obvious.
Okay, now it's talking about like, they're cognitively deficient. That's the point. And then she says, well, okay, that refers to like retarded people. Like, when I say retarded, I don't mean like people like him. I mean like actual retarded people. And it's like, well, you're saying something I didn't say. Well, that's a logical entailment of what you said, you idiots. Maybe you are retarded. Maybe it does apply to you. Or whatever. Next person, this guy's plonker.
Feminism has made things easier for men.
Sexually? Yeah. Getting an actual relationship?
Jenny,
No.
nice to meet you. You said that feminism is easier for men, or is
it's made things, I think, easier in society for men. Yeah. Now men don't have to commit, and they're being offered sex from women for free, so they have to actually effectively do less
I agree with that
and be
proposition.
motivated less, because feminism has a kind of insisted on this culture of sex and hooking up, and I think that has been a net negative for women.
On good faith, I just want to say I think you're approaching this with like the best interest for women. Like, you think that is negative for women and harmful, and I think in some aspects we can agree to that. I do think that there are some aspects of sex work or OnlyFans or whatnot that maybe men are definitely the huge consumers of. But if we are so concerned with women putting that out for free, it's charged, right? They're making money off of it. Then why are we not putting the onus more on men for being the one that is in control?
That's fine. That's a two-quote way. Okay, that is a fallacy. Okay, you can agree to that proposition and then have your argument still. And it's like, dude, this is like basic philosophy. Dude.
That demand, right? So we can take away the supply or condemn it all we want.
Great, but the problem
if
still
there's
exists.
no
The proposition is still in
men to
place,
be
even
the
if that is
consumers
true.
of
Even
said
if we agree to
products,
that, even if we
then
grant every
wouldn't you
single
think that
last word you said, the proposition is still true. So who cares?
What's all the
It has
issue
nothing
that
to do
you're
with the
bringing
argument.
up?
Yeah, I actually agree with you on that. And I, before they,
That it allows men to be more emotionally intelligent, allows them to understand what that looks like, and also
You're an
be able
idiot.
to
Next
connect.
person.
And don't they have gratification from chasing us? Like, it's a hunter versus prey situation to me. So I feel like a lot of relationships, especially back then, were based on trying to get to home run like very fast. And now that we have the freedom to not commit and not tie ourselves to one man for the rest of our life, I just don't necessarily think that's bad. I just don't.
It's not like your words. Like, she made like 3 separate things that could be summarized in statements, and they have no correlation to each other.
Think the revolution has decreased our value. We're not chewed gum. We're people who value connection, and sex doesn't always have to have this deep meaning. It is
So many ungrounded assumptions. Okay,
It's just connect-
you're an idiot that's been piped by a bunch of dudes. Cool. Okay, next person.
very nice to meet you, Zoe. You have very pretty eyes.
Thank you. So you keep talking about OnlyFans and Kim Kardashian, and well, I do OnlyFans.
Okay.
And I'm a stripper as well.
So you're in the sex industry.
Well, I'm mainly a recording artist, but I do that to fund the music.
Okay.
But, you're saying basically that we kind of like devalue ourselves, but at the same time, I'm celibate. I still consider myself a woman of God. And so.
Oh my god, bro. Just kill me, please. Just end it all, dude.
Not all of us are just out there just, oh, hey, showing the goods.
Cool. Okay, next person.
And I think the answer to that is
You have
no.
no argument.
Right. I would
Okay,
argue
this
that
chick, she made funny faces out the video.
No,
Surely she has
feminism,
something
I would
smart
say, is
to
a movement where
Let's go back.
What we should organize society on.
Catherine. Okay, Catherine. What do you have to say?
Problem that I find with feminism is that it's
All right, we don't care about you.
Thank you.
Next person.
Nice to meet you. I'm
Nice to meet you,
Catherine.
Catherine. Candace.
You brought up a book about that we're going to biology and that biology is what we should organize society on based on like what skill.
I don't think Candace believes that, but that's certainly an aspect of it. That's also why things like free trade and liberalism are bad ideas.
Sure. I can restate what I said. There is a book, and the argument that's being made is that you can't override, you can't outthink your biology. Is the easiest way to say it. So, feminism, I would say, is a movement where they are trying to outthink biology, meaning that all we have to.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, outthink biology. I mean, the whole point of being a Christian is you're trying to overcome your flesh, which is a biological thing. Now, but it is true we should base society on biological influence and desires, and we should factor that in.
To do is this, and that, and then magically we're going to be transformed, and that desire within us to want to start a family is just going to like die, or we're going to be happier doing this thing. And I think the answer to that is no.
Right. I would argue that our biology does not have as much of an effect on the things that we choose to do with our careers, with our life choices, as you think it does. Our closest ancestors are chimps and bonobos. Bonobos are matriarchal chimps.
So that's wrong. Okay, we are not animals. Okay, I have writings on. Actually, I haven't posted them anywhere, but I have a bunch of writings prepared for like evolution debates or whatever. But that's no more propaganda that isn't true. So see how like a secular evolution assumptions form these dumb arguments.
Miracle. So
everything she's saying is wrong now because she believes in something that isn't true. It's presupposed. Okay, whatever. Cool. Oh, is this the one person? Feminism is wrongly interpreted as anti-men when it benefits both men and women. Okay, we don't care. Alright, that's the video. Join the Discord, like the video, whatever you want to do. Subscribe for more. This was painful to watch. See you in the next one.